Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and I have another exciting headphone review for you today, and that is the Audeze LCD XC 2021 edition. So this is the closed back version of their popular Audeze LCD X line. It is also, and I confirmed this by serial number, one of the 2021 editions. So we will dive into that today. But before we do, please remember to like, subscribe, and to do all of those things that you do to support YouTube channels. All right, diving in. This one was sent to me by a friend of the channel who saw my comparison video of $1,200 to $1,800 open back headphones. And at the end of that, I said, hey, I would love to do a closed back comparison, but there's a couple other models that I need to hear. And one of them was, in fact, the LCD X closed. And they reached out to me and said, hey, I have one to send you. So here it is. And so I've been listening to this for a while, and now I get to talk about it. And I think this is going to be a pretty interesting review because there are some pretty interesting items to discuss on this one. So let's get into that. So let's talk about pricing. Where does this fall in? So this is $1,300 US for direct from Audeze for what they call the creator package. All right, and that includes the headphone, a single-ended stock cable, which I will talk more about in just a moment, and then a carrying case. Okay, a hard shell carrying case to carry it in. All right, so that package they call the creator package, and again, that's $1,300 US. For $400 more, okay, bringing the price, for $500 more, bringing the price up to $1,800 USD. We have the premium package, which gets you the headphone, the cable I just showed you, a balanced cable also from Audeze, and then an upgraded travel case, which is their premium case, they say. So again, that is the premium package, $1,800 US for that. I'm going to go ahead and drop right here to say that if you are, say, starting from scratch to buy this headphone, and what I mean is you have no reliable EQ method at your disposal, plan on adding at least $100 for Audeze's Reveal EQ, which they bundle for $100 off of their Reveal, $100, yes, $100 off of their Reveal EQ when you buy with one of their headphones, okay? And that is because, a little bit of a spoiler here, sonically, equalizing these things is an absolute must. And we will get to more why I say that here in a little bit. But plan to add, again, at least $100. Maybe a little bit more if you choose to go hardware equalization when you buy one of these, if you don't already have reliable equalization methods that you like. Okay, other important features. The rated impedance on these things is 20 ohms with a 100 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity. They are pretty easy to drive. Okay, I successfully power these off of mobile devices like my Canon N6 Mark II DAP with the EO2 module. Drove these just fine. I used my Cord Hugo 2 to drive them. That's more powerful than most mobile devices, but that handled them just fine. But I think they are fairly amp-friendly in terms of drivability. You can drive them with somewhat low-powered amps without much difficulty. They are big and heavy, okay? You see here, if you are familiar with Audeze headphones, this has the classic Audeze LCD series build with the added mass of putting more material on here to close off the cups. Okay, so this is an LCD-X, just with something, a cover over the back of the cups to make them closed back, which of course is going to add material, is going to add mass, which in Earth's gravitational field is going to add weight. Okay, so if the heaviness and the fit and the feel of Audeze's LCD line does not work for you, these will continue to not work for you with the additional concern of the additional mass of making them closed back. If Audeze's LCD line fits you fine and you have no issues with their comfort, you're probably still going to be okay because the closed back nature doesn't add all that much extra mass. There is some, okay? It's of course not zero, but you know, it's not a crazy amount. But it still does a pretty good job of distributing the weight and the mass around your head so that it, you know, it fits rather well. And the clamp here is, I mean, it's reasonably clampy, okay? All that. So the comfort, if you're okay with the comfort of Audeze's LCD line, you're probably going to be okay here too. It still has the issue of when you shake your head, you can see that they wobble around a little, you know, quite a bit because that's a Newton's first law thing, right? You know, an object at rest wants to stay at rest, one that's in motion wants to stay in motion, and the more massive the thing gets, the more it wants to do those things once, okay? So keep that in mind. All right. Yeah, but I mean, other than that, we have, you know, really thick, angled, soft ear pads here. The stock option for the ear pads is leather, and that's, I believe, what these are. They are very cushy. You can get a non-leather edition of them if you wish. Okay, just order that at checkout from Audeze's website. Okay. What else do we need to say about build? We have the typical dual 3-pin mini XLR cable entry here, all right, which is standard Audeze fare. Oop, they're 4-pin, sorry about that. But anyway, dual mini XLR inputs on that. And then we can look a little bit more at the stock cable. Okay, I didn't use it much. I'm fairly familiar with Audeze cabling at this point because I've reviewed several of them now. They're all like this. They are the oxygen-free copper, supposedly. They're a little on the thinner side. They have some memory and kink to them. They're okay. They're not fantastic. They're okay. They're functional. I think you can easily improve the sound over them by going with aftermarket cables, and I know people disagree with me about that claim, but I will link to, and I have a whole series going on about the science behind why we can hear cable differences. Okay, and again, doesn't mean that we always do. Okay, but anyway, for most of my evaluation, I used this Forza Noir HPC, I believe is what this one is. Okay, for the testing, which has a balance connector, and then if I needed to go single-ended, I have an XLR to 1/4-inch adapter from Corpse Cable of their Gravedigger line, and so if I needed to use single-ended, I would use that adapter for that. Okay. What else do we need to talk about other than, you know, the closed back nature of them? I think does look nice. This finish right here's got like a carbon fiber pattern behind it. It is very shiny and reflective. As you can probably see, all the lights in my room are likely reflecting off of this right into the camera. Okay, it's prone to fingerprinting, which is why I have this cloth here to wipe them off so that they remain pretty while they are on camera and so forth. But yeah, it is an Audeze LCD headphone in the build, in the look, in the functionality, all of that, through and through. Okay, definitely belongs in that line there. All right, I think that is about all that we need to discuss as far as build and build goes. There are some ergonomic quirks which I think very much become part of the story with this one in terms of how you can use it. The size is one thing. On Audeze's website for this model, and I will link to that below, it's like they go hard after the fact that they envisioned this as a headphone for music creators, for professional audio work. So mixing, mastering, all of that kind of stuff. That's how they foresee this being used, and that's how they market it, and that's how they talk it up. And then the closed back nature is they're saying that, hey, if you're in a busy studio with lots of stuff going on around you, you know, the closed back nature, you can close yourself off from the world, hear the music a little bit better. So let me make a comment on the isolation. The isolation here, in terms of holding ambient sounds out, is okay, right? It's not fantastic, Apologies, thought there was a technical error there, so I just edited a thing out. Okay, so how well does it isolate then, right? When you put this on, like, it clamps reasonably hard. The pads really conform to the head pretty well, even with my glasses. Like, the seal is pretty good when I keep my head straight ahead like this. If I turn a little bit, just the way your face naturally scrunches up on and pulls on one side, scrunches up on the other, like the fit changes just a little bit and breaks the seal. If I take my glasses off, that effect lessens somewhat, but doesn't completely go away. And then also, like, sonically, just to let you know, I didn't notice a whole lot of difference, glasses on, glasses off. Maybe if I was straining, a half a decibel of bass gain, maybe, okay? But not a ton. All right, so that's something to think about and keep in mind there. Now, the holding the ambient sound out, like if I snap my fingers around like this or I clap, okay, I can still readily hear those sounds. Like, it's not isolating all that well. I have heard other closed backs isolate better. Like, I can still hear a little bit the steady drone of the fan noise from my desktop PC, which is off to my left. It's not terrible. There is a fair amount of ambient attenuation here, but it's like, I don't know if it's as strong as Audeze claims in terms of if you're in a studio with people doing whatever behind you, that you're going to block everything out. I don't think it's quite that good. Okay, it does hold sound in reasonably well. I cranked up to about a 75 dB AV on some music, and then I just stuck them on this headphone stand here and let them play. And you can still hear it in the room. It's not bad. Okay, so it does hold sound in reasonably well. But if you're sitting at a mixing console or at a cubicle, for example, the person in the next cubicle over or right next to you at the music console is probably still going to hear a fair amount of what's going on. All right, so there is that. Okay, then another big ergonomic issue that I'm going to talk about, well, I mean, I should mention, because of the weight and the size of these things, they are not mobile or travel friendly. So these are not an OTG headphone, even though they are closed back. I would not plan to use them that way. That's going to be a pain in the butt ergonomically if you do that. All right. That brings us then to the sound. And before I forget to mention it, because sometimes I have done that lately, is I'm going to talk about the gear that I use to power these. So I just mentioned that I checked these on my Canon N6 Mark II with the EO2 module, that's DAP, and then my Cord Hugo 2 transportable DAC amp. And then other DACs that I used in a desktop situation is I used my Berkeley Alpha Series 2, my Schiit Bifrost 2. I have an SMSL SU9N in for evaluation, use that a little bit. For amps, I use the SMSL SH9, which I published a review of recently, which I can link to below. I have a Garage 1217 Project Ember little hybrid tube amp in for review. I used that. I used a Lake People G111. I have a Vioelectric DHA V226 DAC amp in, so I used that a fair amount to evaluate both this and that V226, review pending. And then also my Big Daddy, the Vioelectric HPA V281 headphone amp, used that. I also used the Hugo 2 as just a pure DAC with some of those amps at different times in there as well. So a variety of signal chains and amp types in there, and a variety or pretty wide ranging on the price scale as well. Okay, so the sound then. I found this to be very much, and I mean very much, a Jekyll and Hyde situation. I mentioned early in the video that I think EQing these things is an absolute must. Like, you basically have to understand what makes these things tick. So here's the bottom line sonically. Straight out of the box, no equalization, stock tuning, utter garbage. Okay? It just is. It is utter garbage with the stock tuning. It really sounds like to me, and apologies in advance to Audeze if this is a straight up mischaracterization, but it really just comes across as they took an LCDX and they slapped a nice looking cover on the cups and then just let it out the door. Okay, that really to me seems like that's all they did, because the stock tuning is, again, I come back to they claim on their website, and they really push this aggressively on the web page for this headphone, is that it is for music creators, professional audio work, mixing, mastering, monitoring, that sort of thing. Okay, the problem is the stock tuning is not up to that task. It is very, very bass lean. There is basically a brick wall disappearance of sub bass. Okay, and like you can find frequency response graphs around the web of this, where you just see the bass just go off a cliff. Okay, somewhere in like the 60, 70, 80 hertz range, it just dies, right? All of that, and then you can also hear a fairly aggressive mid-forwardness, mostly in the upper mids, but also a bit in the lower mids too, which makes them very shouty, very honky, and it also really pushes the vocals forward, so that the mids, particularly in the upper mids range, but in a lot of the upper registers of the vocal range, just pushes the vocal presence at the listener. So if the soundstage is here for me, then it sounded like the vocals were like here, just really pushed forward at me with that stock tuning. And then the treble, like, I mean, at that point, who really cares what the treble is, because just the bass is gone and the mids are so far forward, you can't really hear anything else of what's going on. Plus, the soundstage just sounds really tight and compressed, and the spatial presentation is not very coherent. If I had to listen to these with just the stock tuning, I wouldn't bother. You would have to pay me to take them, and then I would probably still sell them at that point if I had to listen to the stock tuning the whole time. So I don't know why that decision was made. And by that decision, I just mean the decision to let these go out the door and into production with that tuning. It is a mystery to me. I can only speculate. Okay, and I want to avoid too much speculation on that if possible. However, when you EQ these things and you take the time to dial it in, they can become absolutely incredible. And I'm serious. The difference here with just for what I found was actually rather simple EQ is just literally night and day. Like, I hesitate to use terms like night and day when I talk about audio because we use those terms a lot. It's often overselling it. Not here. It is like a completely different headphone with a little bit of EQ. How did I go about doing that? I used the Shit Loki Mini, little parametric equalizer on it here, and I have not touched the knobs on this since I plugged it in and used it with the LCDX. But you can see here, the bass knob I have turned to about, what is that, 4 o'clock-ish? Okay, and if I understand this product well enough, Shit has designed these to go from a 6 dB attenuation to a 6 dB boost on each of these knobs. So, we're talking close to a 4 dB boost here, probably in the bass. On the bass knob. And then for the lower mids, I have it turned to what's probably about 930. For the upper mids, I have it turned to what's probably about 9 o'clock. Excuse me, this one's maybe more like 10:30 and this one's more like 10 o'clock. It's not quite to the 9 o'clock. And then the treble I ended up just leaving at the neutral position or the 12 o'clock position here. For me, with those EQ settings on this little guy, these things became headphones that I honestly did not want to stop listening to. So the rest of my evaluation is going to be with that EQ setting on these. Okay? The bass wakes up. You get a fair amount of sub-bass rumble. You get some excellent bass extension. There's pretty good bass detail, pitch articulation, and definition and texture going on in there. You go up through the mids. The mids smooth out. The tonal balance between the mids becomes a lot better so that harmonics are not pushed unnaturally higher than fundamental frequencies, so they sound much more balanced and much more natural. And then the treble has a very good balance of sparkle and presence, but also just, again, sounding nicely tonally balanced and natural in the presentation. So everything in there with those EQ settings just improved. The tonal balance was really nice. The timbre was fairly natural, one of the most natural timbres I have gotten out of an Audeze, because in my opinion, timbre has been a struggle with Audeze for many of their sets, but this got really, really good with that EQ setting. Okay, and then the soundstage just opened up, and it became one of the biggest sound stages I have ever heard from a closed back headphone. It's still a bit of that Audeze bubble effect, where it's like a 360-degree bubble around your head. And I have used the analogy before, if you're at like a symphonic concert, that Audezes make it sound like you're standing on the maestro stand rather than being back in the audience. And that's still true here. It still has that staging effect, but it just sounds big and grand. Like, even though you might be on the stage, on the maestro's box, it sounds like you're in a concert hall. It's just fairly big and convincing in that way. And then just it has quite holographic imaging and separation. In other words, it's just a really excellent sounding headphone with these EQ settings. It becomes a technical marvel for the price. It also has really nice timbre, sounds very natural, and just incredibly enjoyable. There's excellent dynamics to it. It's got a lot of pop. It's got a lot of punch and slam. There is nice, convincing, and realistic snap on snare drum hits. The resolution and the detail retrieval are there, like room reverbs are pulled out and resolved very well. If you're listening to a live recording, you get audience noise and all of that. That is both detailed but also spatially sounding really accurate. Like even kind of behind you, you can hear things going on. Like, these become arguably one of the top closed back headphones on the market, in my opinion, with this EQ. But I have to stress, with the stock tuning, they are utter garbage. Stock tuning is bad. It's just bad. Okay? So, that is why I mentioned earlier that EQing these is a must. So whatever price that you get these for, be it brand new for the $1,300 creative package or the creator package or the $1,800 premium package direct from Audeze, or you buy them used, if you don't already have some reliable EQ method that you trust on hand, add $100 at least for the Reveal EQ bundle that Audeze bundles with this, which even then, like, I was unable to try the Reveal EQ with this because I had downloaded the trial version of their Reveal EQ when I reviewed the LCDX 2021 Open Back, which was back in October, November, something like that. I can link to that below. And I tried the Reveal EQ for that one, and really I found it to be a pain to set up and then did not get good results from it, so I can't speak to how well the Reveal EQ is here. I personally prefer hardware-based EQ if I'm going to EQ at all. I don't necessarily like EQing, okay? But I prefer the hardware-based one, and I would really start at minimum with the Shit Loki here, because I think you do need independent controls for the two, at least the two halves of the mid-range, upper and lower. So add $150 for this, and then of course that limits you to only single-ended signal chains, which may or may not be an issue for you. I don't know. Depends on your system. But then, $300 for the Loki S, which is the balanced version of this, but also comes with two extra bands of EQ in it. So, I mean, plan on something like that. If you have an RME ADI2, the built-in EQ features on that are probably pretty solid for these purposes as well. But the point is, add the cost of that equalization to whatever cost you get this for, particularly if you're going to buy used and not get the bundled deal for Reveal EQ, because I think that's $200 if you just buy and download that on its own. Okay. So, real quick comparisons with some other like sets, okay? Because I have in my personal collection the Focal Radiance, which is a closed back dynamic driver that sells for $1,300 US dollars. It was a limited edition that sold out initially, but Focal is bringing it back, and I think you can pre-order these, like maybe from headphones.com or something. Anyway, another run is coming, so those will be an option soon. And then my Fostex TH900 with the Lawton chambers on it, okay, which by the time you buy a TH900 and put Lawton chambers on it, you're, you know, in the $1,800 to $2,000 range, probably. Okay. To focus the comparison on what the LCD-XC does above and beyond those is it's the biggest sound stager and arguably the most holographic in its spatial presentation of all of these three. I would say that depending on the type of music, with bigger works, like we're talking like a Tchaikovsky 1812 overture kind of size with all of that stuff going on in there, I think this holds it together the best. I think that the huge planar-magnetic driver in it has a lot to do with that. But anyway, it keeps it cool the most on that, that sort of thing. Now, I think both the Radiance and the TH900 have a little bit better bass detail, like deep sub-bass detail and pitch definition and that sort of thing. Like individual notes just sound a little bit more resolved and a little bit more natural, and you can hear the subtle differences in pitches a little bit clearer on those. But this is not bad in that way in any regard with the EQ. Okay, so it's just right hot on their heels there. But like I say, biggest sound stager, most holographic spatial presentation to go with this. The mid-range detail is probably going to be a little bit better than the Radiance. Not probably, it's just a little bit better than the Radiance, maybe just behind the TH900 here. And then I think this one with the EQ that I showed you, which is actually just the stock level of treble, that this one has like the most natural treble presence to it of these three. Like, the Radiance is just a little bit darker sounding, and then the TH900s are V-shaped, so the treble is pushed a little bit unnaturally forward sometimes. So I think this one has the best treble thing in that regard. So, just quick sonic comparisons. I hope to do a more fleshed out comparison video of closed backs like I did for open backs in the near future. I need to hear a couple more models before I can do that. Okay. Final thoughts. So, sonically, again, these are Jekyll and Hyde. They out of the box stock tuning, can them, just utter garbage. I don't know how they can pass for anything resembling neutral or even useful or enjoyable. My opinion, of course, but I heard them technically improve from a detail retrieval standpoint, a spatial presentation standpoint, and a timbre standpoint with these EQ settings on the Loki Mini that I just talked about. Okay, so they can be an amazing headphone that I really enjoy listening to. Had several long listening sessions that I found very enjoyable. So yeah, if you're a professional music creator, okay, and you're trying to use the stock tuning on these, like you're gonna bring your bass up way too much, you're gonna recess your mids too much, and it's just not going to sound right. But when you EQ these things, and they take the EQ very well, you can make them sound however you want. They just are utterly amazing, really amazing. Okay, yeah. So, but then the other catch to that is they become ergonomically difficult to live with because you are going to be inherently tethered to whatever system does the equalization that you need it to. This I can't really carry with me. My K and DAP has EQ functions built into it, but they seem kind of buried in menus, complicated to get to. And then, of course, you'd have to turn them on and off if you're going to use multiple sets of headphones with that. So that just becomes an ergonomic headache. You could use something like Equalizer APO if you have a Windows-based desktop PC system. That's going to A, tether you to that desktop computer. And then B, unless it has been fixed in the last 18 months or whatever since I last used it, Equalizer APO breaks and needs to be uninstalled and reinstalled every time you do an update to Windows. I don't know if that has changed. But even if that has changed, it also requires you to use the Windows sound mixer, which means no exclusive audio output, which means if you ever use MQA or DSD or anything like that, you're not going to get bit perfect audio. You're not going to get those into your headphones if you're running through that equalizer APO. Audeze's Reveal EQ has the same problem in that it tethers you to whatever station you're using the headphone. You have to decide whether or not that is ergonomically feasible for you. And then, of course, no matter how much you EQ, you still have the Audeze LCD build, which may or may not work for you. And I think is kind of an ergonomic difficulty because just their sheer size makes them fairly tetherable and usable in like only 1 or 2 spaces kind of a thing. For professionals, that may not be a big deal because you're just going to use them at your console, wherever that is. Okay? For audiophiles and end listeners, that could be a problem, particularly if you want to take these to a secondary setup somewhere else. All right, but coming back to without EQ, don't bother. With EQ, can be utterly amazing, and I'm thoroughly impressed with them with EQ, and we'll be sad to see them go because of that. Like, these are all very good. Okay, these are both very good. These isolate better, I should say, so like they still have a spot in my collection because they are also stunningly good closed backs, easy to drive, but mobile and OTG friendly, which is what I need them for. This is not that. Okay, I'm rambling. I'll leave it there. This has been my review of the Audeze LCDX closed 2021 edition. Okay, yeah, very mixed thoughts on it, but it can be amazing. I am Wave Theory. Thanks for watching this review, and as always, enjoy the music.